Good morning, and thank you for joining me for the virtual version of Paranormal 101. Um, this is the class that's been kind of traveling around, and I'm glad that we could finally have a virtual version here. If you are in attendance, if you could leave a comment so that I know you're here. We did have a few tickets that were sold for this, so that's wonderful. And then I will also be talking about the merch packs. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end because I see a couple of people actually purchase that. So that's very, very cool. So let's get started, shall we? So just a couple quick changes here so that I'm ready. And I'll actually probably take me off the screen so that it's not too distracting. Hello, Strange Talk. Welcome to class. All right, so let's do this here. I'm going to take just stop this here so you guys can see me. All right. As a purveyor of genuine information regarding psychic phenomena, I welcome this resurgence of curiosity in worlds beyond the physical because contemplating these matters tends to make people think about themselves, their ultimate fate, and the nature of humankind itself. And this is author and parapsychologist Hans Holzer. Now, Hans Holzer is a name you will see many times in the paranormal world. He is, as I like to call him, one of the paranormal investigative fathers. He kind of kicked off his books and off he went. So you will see his name a lot throughout the paranormal series here. So I want to thank you guys for joining me for Creepy Confidential, the library lecture series, but this is the virtual version, of course. My name is Noelle, and I am the weirdo Wisconsinite and host of Creepy Confidential. Uh, now, Creepy Confidential is a podcast where I talk about cryptids, cults, conspiracies, and other worldly creepy, my first love being the paranormal. I have been interested in the paranormal and odd happenings since I was a young girl, going to the libraries and just diving in as many books as I possibly could. I have been formally researching the paranormal and unexplained phenomena for 20 years, going on 21, and a paranormal investigator for 17, going on 18, as a lead investigator and researcher of the team Girls Investigating Ghosts and the Supernatural, or shortly known as GIGS or GIGS Paranormal, is what we kind of called ourselves for a while there. We investigated places such as the Institute of Health Therapeutics, aka Starvation Heights. She might sound familiar. Creepy Confidential has done an episode on her. Northern State Hospital and Western State Hospital, which both of those were actually are mental institutions, mental asylums known back in the day. Now, let's start out with talking about some of the background here. Starvation Heights, you can see the cabin of a serial killer, really, Dr. Linda Hazard, where she would perform her quote medical fasting treatments to starve her patients using her book, Fasting for the Cure. She would get the power of attorney for her patients, have them sign over their wealth and belongings, and then once they were starved to the point of delirium, uh, you would tell her patients that they were just too ill to speak for themselves. Once they died of starvation, she would then perform the autopsy because she was the quote unquote doctor, and then conveniently also had a crematory short distance from the cabin you see here on the property, which I have been to and investigated. Or she simply would save the wood needed to perform kind of a backwoods cremation, and she would simply toss them off the ravine in the front of the cabin. We're kind of off to the side, but the ravine is back where those trees are there. So it's very convenient the way that she did things. Now, Dr. Linda Hazard here, you can see on the left, and then one of her patients, Dorothea, which was a very famous case. Dorothea and Claire, the Williamson sisters, were kind of the reason she got caught. Um, Now, Dorothea, they both were under treatment at the Institute, but sadly, her sister didn't make it out. Dorothea would be kind of driven slightly mad, and when she was able to take enough reason, she would manage to wander down into the driveway where someone found her, the skeleton rag of bones that you can see here. So that's where it kicked off. It's where everything, newspapers, you name it. But oddly enough, she didn't quite get the punishment she deserved, in my opinion. Now, her book, and is something that you still can purchase. And of course, I do have a copy of this book. The book I have is one that was printed when she was still alive, Fasting for the Cure. Now, she would use this book to as her recipes, basically her vegetable broths, her enemas that would last all day. It was quite crazy what she would do to these poor individuals. Now, another place to talk about, of course, I included that for you as well. If you'd like to check out the Linda Hazard episode here, forgot to put that in there. uh, so, Western State Hospital is another institution that we had the privilege to go to what was left of it. This has since been turned into rubble, but the name still remains the same, and it is still used. The new one is used for mental patients. Now, this location was actually, they both were very active, the mental institutions. Western State Hospital has kind of been unfortunately put under the rug about what may have happened there. Countless lobotomies were performed, as well as canisters found of cremated remains packed into tobacco tins. Who are they? Are their spirits still stuck there? Is this the reason why they're stuck there? And again, this background information is what's important, because you need to know what you're kind of getting into when you get to these locations. Northern State Hospital. This one has I always think this picture is very ominous. I think it's just because of the casting of the development. Now, Northern State Hospital it is a smaller facility. This facility still stands on the grounds, but it's used for, I think, like a Job Corps or something like that. But what set this particular hospital aside was they used vocational rehab for their mental patients, which was very unheard of back then. It's kind of a thing now where they're trying to help patients through, using their brains and things like that. But for this one, confirmed records of of patient abuse, overpopulation, and radiation experiments, which is crazy, conducted against the will, injecting their patients with 100 microcuries of iron 55, radiographic radio active material. This location also included tins of ashes, similar to the other one, but this time it was food tins, packed, full of unmarked mixed cremated remains. I give you this background information on these three locations kind of briefly because knowing background information such as this is crucial to investigating the paranormal. Knowing what has happened on the property and the claims of current activity is also very important. Today in Paranormal 101, I'm going to pull back the curtain on some information you might need when exploring the world of spooks, specters, and ghosts. Now, if anyone remembers that line, I think you're probably about my age, but of course.
Are you troubled by strange noises in the middle of the night?
Do you experience feelings of dread in your basement or attic?
Have you or any of your family ever seen a spook, specter, or ghost?
If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Pick up your phone and call the professionals. Go Ghostbusters!
This movie single-handedly inspired little Noelle to become the paranormal investigator and researcher that she is today. So I will reference this movie a lot in various different classes. So get ready for that. Now, in Paranormal 101, we are going to cover the two most common types of hauntings, modern and non-modern methods of paranormal investigating, and then two common types of entities. Now, these subjects, of course, are kind of just jumping off points within the world of paranormal and parapsychology. There's a lot of maybes, if so's, and thans. So I like to at least start the basics to get you started for you to begin to see what's out there and to form your own opinion. Now, at the end of everything, I'm going to finish up with my three golden rules of ghost hunting, because I think you have to have some sort of baseline what you need to be looking out for. Now, let's start by diving into the most common types of hauntings. Now, knowing the type of haunting could help you obtain the proper evidence for the case, but also prepare you for how the interaction might go when investigating. Out in the field, an investigator might encounter a conscious or a non conscious or a residual haunting. Now, I will call that a non conscious, a residual haunting, kind of from here on out to hopefully keep that confusion gone. Think of these two types as kind of different types of conversations. Maybe one is an in-person conversation, that conscious back and forward. Hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine. Back and forth. The other being similar to watching a movie, though, and the actors are not aware of you, or in fact, you're yelling at the screen at the bad guy, telling them it's right behind you, and they can't hear you, and it does not change what they're going to do. I like to use movies a lot as visual examples to explain, because for me, I'm a visual person, and many people have also seen these pop culture examples. But however, have no fear. I have some real life examples for you as well. This isn't going to just be movie examples. So let's start with the residual entity. A good cinema analogy for a residual entity is the movie High Spirits. I really hope that you guys have seen this one. It's a classic. So it starts kind of the basic premise. The Plunkett family buys a castle, well, it has a castle, and is hosting a bunch of guests in an effort to try and save the castle, right? They're running out of money, that sort of thing. To bring in guests, they try to say that it's a house, but the castle is haunted, and they proceed to pretend like it's haunted. However, one night, one of the guests is enjoying a bottle of beverage, if you get my drift, and wanders into one of the rooms. Suddenly, the spirits of Mary and Martin appear, and they do so every night in the same manner. Jack attempts to get in the middle, but they do not change their course. And when he tries to step in the middle, it becomes very apparent that they are indeed spirits. Let's check it out. Oh, I skipped right past that. I wrote out all these apparently.
So, you wee harlot.
No, Martin, no.
You won't come with me, huh? Hey, I know.
Party's over.
Party's over. Horse mouth.
Take your hands off the girl. You're gonna be.
Where is it? Oh, quick, you son.
No, Martin.
Where is he?
Martin, there's no one.
Where is he?
Wait, Martin, there's no one.
Where is he?
There's no one.
Beautiful woman. Where did he go? He'll kill you.
There's no one.
Am I going to leave?
So that one's, if you have not seen this, if you're watching this, I highly recommend it. Very, very good. Now, another movie example for the next one to explain a conscious entity is Mr. and Mrs. Maitland in Beetlejuice. Also another movie I have also seen probably too many times than I'm willing to admit. Now, although Lydia is more of a medium in this movie, but I like to use the example of how the ghosts are able to communicate with her kind of back and forth, and eventually the other people catch him, they see him too. So the Maitlands become aware that they are indeed in the afterlife and are trying to communicate with Lydia once they realize she can see them. Let's check it out.
What? Living Dead, it's a movie. If I had seen a ghost at your age, I would have been scared out of my wits.
You're not gross. Why are you wearing sheets?
We're practicing.
You can see us without the sheets.
Of course I can see you.
Well, how is it that you see us and nobody else can?
Love that movie. Now, again, while we can't see the entities as clearly as Lydia can, despite how cool that might be, we are trying to get their messages or obtain proof of their presence through investigative tools. Audio, visual, or environmental parameter changes such as temperature or electromagnetic field, these are ways we are trying to capture that evidence. The key words to remember with how conscious entities represent kind of in words are aware and communicate. A conscious entity is just that. They are able to be aware of what's happening and they are able to communicate. A residual haunting is the completely opposite. They are not aware and they are not able to communicate. In conjunction with a residual haunting is the stone tape theory. And now, historically, it used to be a little different, known as place memory, where a location or an item has the ability to kind of retain echoes or events of what once occurred. Now, the stone tape theory is the idea that some materials, such as quartz, limestone, and some earth metals, are capable of holding imprints of past events, such as intense emotions. Now, these imprints then potentially can recall in the future, resulting in residual haunt activity. While this theory is considered a pseudoscientific theory with no definitive scientific proof, we want to try conducting our own experiment with the items we have collected. And that is something you will see with Creepy Confidential. We have our interactive traveling items to try to prove that. You never know. Will the individual who handles these items feel the recall of where they have been? Will the item then hold the emotions of who visit and handle them? All things to consider. Charles Babbage recorded in 1838 in the work The Ninth Bridgewater Tryst, kind of a way of describing place memory. The air itself is one vast library, on whose pages are forever written all that man has ever said or woman whispered. There, in their mutable but unerring characters, mixed with the earliest as well as with the latest sighs of mortality, stand forever recorded, vows unredeemed, promises unfulfilled, perpetuating in the united movements of each particle the testimony of man's changeful will. What a poetic way to describe what we leave behind with our energy. So, what are some real life examples of these? How are some kind of real life? Give us some investigative story time, if you will. Sure, let's do that. So, the Green Lake murder happened in Green Lake, Seattle, Washington. This is Sylvia and Bob Gaines. Sylvia Gaines was murdered by her father and unfortunately once lover as well, Bob Gaines, near to the water's edge between 9 and 9:30 p.m. on June 16th, 1926, following an altercation where she allegedly had told him she no longer wanted to be part of that incestuous relationship. This case rocked the newspapers during the apprehension, the trial, and the sentencing. Giggs was at Green Lake, obviously much later, one evening investigating the claims of a woman entity, that is allegedly seen around the water's edge. For the case research, I also managed to uncover a copy of the original police sketching showing the crime scene. Wow, things like this are important to obtain. Having these police sketches and knowing what happened so that you can retrace the steps and potentially figure out where something like a stone tape theory, like a residual haunting, place memory might be taking place. So let's talk about this. The drawing depicts how she had entered the water, which most likely, to run from the man that you can see here. Let's see if I can get my pointer to work. Yeah. So you can see the man here. Now, enters the water, right? Enters, struggle, goes down, probably trying to get away, pops out back out onto the land over here. Now, this is unfortunately where she is slain by being struck in the head with a rock, and the time of death being between 9 and 9:30 at night, like we talked about. And yes, there is a reason I have mentioned that time, because when we get to the evidence, you're going to want to remember that time. Now, we had been investigating into the evening. It was dark outside, and we split the crew. A few where she had gone into the water, a few where she had come out of the water, where she indeed had been slain. All of a sudden, we picked up what sounded like the murder taking place. Bits and pieces of it, though. A deranged transatlantic accent came across our walkie talkies. We had never pressed the walkie talkies. We made sure we were on a separate channel. But so you also did not hear that odd sound. And no one in today, rarely, unless you're doing some sort of acting bit, speaks in a transatlantic accent. You will hear a man. He says, "I'm very, very upset with you. You've got me in a rut. I don't like the way you did it. You're making me lie. You make me feel cold. You make me do harm." And we could almost imagine his hair like flying in the wind as he says this, followed by a space of time. And then you hear a woman's voice say, "Bob's safe." And then a little bit more, and you hear, "Don't," in the same woman's voice. And from then on, the line goes dead. We never hear it. So let's take a listen.
Bob, I just talked to Lewis. He told me what you did.
Oh, shit. Bob, did you hear that? Did you hear that?
So we had some guest investigators there that night, as you can hear. He was very excited. So, but you got to hear the audio that took place between this time. This happened between 9 and 9:30 at night, various times, but between that half an hour, we picked up what we think is possibly the murder happening in real life. There was no back and forth interaction, though, between us and the voices. We were just witnessing a time lapse, a residual haunting. As for a conscious spirit, it's more tricky in a real world because you can't see them directly and communicate like you and I do on a daily basis. It's kind of bits and pieces of a conversation, and then a lot of times you're spent trying to figure out what's happening. We aren't as fortunate to see the entities as clear as Lydia. Oftentimes, we don't realize that we were taught that they might have been talking to us the whole time. Now, the very first time I went for a kind of an official research gathering, it wasn't really an investigation, just kind of residual passive type things. That's what we were hoping for at a place called Miller Woodlawn Cemetery in Bremerton, Washington. Now, often new investigators will start their research at cemeteries until they gain access to places like homes or hotels or hospitals. They have to kind of build their clout a little bit. Many people think cemeteries wouldn't be active because people don't die there, or at least we hope they don't die there. Their last rites are typically already read. However, I had a conversation with a historian and someone who dives into the paranormal here in Columbus, and gave me a very interesting kind of outlook. While people are usually already dead, before they get to the cemetery, there is a lot of emotion that happens at a cemetery or a memorial park, right? Pleading over the grave, praying to the heavens, or saying those final goodbyes that can really contribute to activity that can be present in the future. So one night we drove into this memorial park, drove over to an area on the hill away from the lights. We were just obtaining passive recordings. That's all we were trying to do. We were watching through the lens of those old school simple digital cameras. And upon returning home, we started watching and listening to our recordings, and we were shocked at what we found. An EVP. We stumbled across two men talking to us. You will hear another investigator's voice commenting on what might be on the lens, and then you will hear two men's voices. You will hear one, they'll go, you hear her, you say, "What did y'all do to this place?" And the second one is a little more whispered. I hope you can hear it. Says, "Don't you touch her." The voices are much more quiet in this example, but this is often how we collect evidence with audio. And this is sometimes what you have to do. So let's take a listen.
There's no way to tell if this is just the obscuring on the lens. No way to tell that.
Now, of course, kind of tricky to hear, but when we enhance the audio, it's kind of blown up here. It's an older sample too, but that one by far was one of them that really kind of messed with us. So you can hear the engine running. We had to leave that on for safety. We are out in the open late at night with no one in the memorial park, and the window was down. And the fact that you would be able to see anybody standing out directly next to my car. In a memorial park, there are no large headstones, just those flat ones that typically show the veteran that is under the ground there. So that was pretty creepy to us, at least. So these spirits or entities, are usually all of them that we talk about are usually in two big categories: human and non-human. Again, a thing to remember is there is no way to definitively prove what we are actually encountering out in the field, but that is why we continue to do the research and collect the evidence. Now, human hauntings are just that: a single person or a collection of people. A famous human haunting are the spirits of Gettysburg. This one, it kind of seems like a no-brainer as to all what might be there, just because of the violent ends, the emotional charges, restless nights full of pain and anticipation of their possible demise or victory. During the day and at night, the sounds of marching drummers providing the pace for the soldiers can still be heard, signaling the men. Oftentimes you can hear rifles as well. At night, film crews and amateur investigators have caught video of spectral images of soldiers walking through the fields. These entities do not interact. They appear just to be on zombie replay, a human non-conscious entity. So now we're kind of putting the two together. Images such as these are actually quite common to the battlefield. Now, I did not collect these. These were collected. I can find different things on YouTube. So unfortunately, I do not know the original source, but there are quite a few of these out there. So let's take a look in the center of the screen. And it's oftentimes this is what they look like. You'll catch these little vertical figures either crossing a path or kind of going in and out of a field. This was just an example that I found that seemed to be the most obvious. I'm not supposed to be there at night, so I'm not sure if these people may have had permission, but it's a good example. So moving on. Now, as for a non-human, I think a lot of people jump right to the overused kind of suspected entity and they go demon. Sure, that's for another class though. A famous non-human entity, I think, would be things, like a ghost train or a ghost ship, like the Flying Dutchman. Now, this one is a little bit potentially of an urban legend, but she has been spotted in many different places. Now, just about everybody has heard about this one due to, of course, Pirates of the Caribbean. The movie, The Flying Dutchman, is indeed, though, a real ship legend kept alive by sailors across the seas. Now, the European legend is of a ghost ship that is doomed to sail forever because the captain gambled his salvation on a pledge to round the Cape of Good Hope during a whopper of a storm. And because of that, the ship is condemned to the course for eternity. There are a few versions of why she is damned to sail forever with her crew, but that is mostly due to people kind of changing portions of the legend to fit their location or through a game of historical telephone. That happens with ghost stories, it happens with regular stories. So that one's kind of can be difficult to track. There hasn't been a credible sighting of the Dutchman, though, since around the mid 20th century. So perhaps she's at rest, for whatever reason. I know that she's an object, but could be that she's at rest. So we know the big groups of hauntings and entities, right? But how do we prove and capture their existence? Now, many people look at these pieces of equipment and they're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot going on there. But that's okay. We're going to break that down. Now, the world nowadays is kind of all but saturated with reality shows and movies showing people on paranormal investigations, right? I think the whole travel channel is now the paranormal channel. You see a group of investigators roaming the halls of some sort of haunted destination around the world. The spectacle of the team getting deep into the investigation with various devices and methods, it'll make anybody want to be a paranormal investigator. But knowing oftentimes it's a lot of obtaining zero information. Now, some I agree with, and some I do not when it comes to these methods and devices. What are these devices? What are they using? What the heck are they tracking with them? So let's go over some new and old methods used in the world of paranormal investigating. I'm going to talk about some that I either don't use or I don't necessarily put a lot of weight into, some easy ones. We'll go over a little bit of everything here. Now, some old school methods used to be something as simple as bells with strings attached, kind of as motion sensors or tripwires draped across doorways. Little canisters of flour was taken around with them, sprinkled down the hallways and on steps to show evidence of a person or entity possibly passing through. Candles were used, similar to how we use like diodes or lights, seen like flickering, seen as sometimes someone or something was trying to communicate. I've even heard things like scrying, using things like mirrors and candles. Now that's not part of I think part of paranormal investigating, but that's what I've seen. An interesting, although controversial one that is still used today are dowsing rods. Now, if these were either a set of metal copper rods or even just a Y-shaped stick, kind of back in the day, it was once used, though, to locate a water source or metals within the ground. But for paranormal usage, investigators tend to use it as a yes or no questions and indicate for the entity to move either the left or the right rod to convey their answer. Or they will use it to detect changes in energy in their surroundings. Personally, if I'm going to use this tool, that is how I'm going to use it. If it's going to even be used at all. So not so much as a method of communication, but more as like a sensor to determine that something may be near, that EMF we talk about. The tool is controversial, though, because it is considered a pseudoscientific tool, as it can be manipulated by the user voluntary or involuntarily by a phenomenon known as the ideomotor phenomenon, which is a physiological phenomenon where the user makes motions unconsciously in their hands because it's something you can't control it, right? Can't control it. Well, what's another piece that is known for this phenomenon, if you're not already thinking about it? Also associated with the Ouija board, or talking boards is another one somehow people talk about either. Now, for science reasons, these tools cannot be used to scientifically prove or disprove the existence of a possible entity or energy for that same reason. You can't take that human factor out. These tools are often a hot ticket topic when it comes to the paranormal world, and are often kind of what causes that us versus them in the divide. Many investigators do or do not. Both of these are still in the old equipment list, as dowsing rods are most likely kind of from the European Middle Ages. And then these Ouija boards were invented during the age of spiritualism, as you can see this woman here in 1890, Helen Nosworthy, by a medium. The technique used for using the Ouija board is automatic writing, though, and that method dates back to like the 1100 AD China. It's way back. So the tools can be kind of polarizing, if you will. Personal opinion. I know this is a class. I do not use the Ouija board at all for multiple reasons. So that's you just can't take the human factor out of it or the other factor out of it. Next up are some pieces of equipment that are kind of must-haves, I think, in an investigator's tool. First off is the millimeter. I think this one is a great one because the tool simultaneously detects electromagnetic field and temperature and reads it out in real time on the display, as well as these little lights to give you a readout kind of that something is changing. It's all the things that it gives out are a wealth of information. As most frequently, these are the parameters that are affected, I think, when an entity is near. You usually see some sort of spike or immediate decrease in temperature and within the world of EMF as well. Tool is also important because I believe that you should take some passive readings before you begin an investigation, because then you know what it's already doing before you're starting to elicit responses. So during those walkthroughs, and then practical reasons, it also frees up holding multiple pieces of equipment. And that's also why I like. So if you're off on a kind of a smaller pack for that night, I like that this one can do multiple things for me. This device features a magnetic field measurement and a real-time air temperature readings between milligauss and microtesla, and the temperature in Fahrenheit or Celsius, depending on where you live in the world. This one does have a little bit of a backstory, a very sad story as to how this piece of equipment was created. Gary Gulka invented this piece of equipment following the tragic loss of his daughter. She was late coming home, and he said he had this very uneasy feeling. He woke to headlights in the driveway, but it was his friend telling her that her friend, that Melissa, his daughter, had lost control and struck a tree. She was removed with the jaws of life, passed away 4 days later. And the family began to experience ADC, or after death communication. That back and forth, doorbells ringing, lights turning on and off. And he was sitting on her bed when the bed depressed, as if she was sitting there. And Mr. Golka is an electrical engineer by trade, and learned from watching paranormal shows of investigators on how he wanted to build this piece of equipment. And he did name it after his daughter. So that's kind of sad. Now, the next one are motion sensor or laser grids. They're very simple. The motion detectors here you can get at most places like Lowe's, Home Depot. Laser grids, although nowadays in most holidays you can get these. They might have Santas or something on them, but the laser grids work fantastic, especially when they are used together with like a static camera. Oftentimes, if the laser is pointing a certain direction as the motion sensor, and then it goes off, the camera will help you see anything that may be happening within the laser. So I really like that one. You can get these, are fairly cheap. They're not necessarily going to give you any readouts, but they're going to tell you if something is hanging out there. Audio recorders. There's a gajillion of these that are out there. I like to get kind of a medium grade. You don't have to have some crazy whammadine piece of equipment, in my opinion. But I also don't think you don't want the cheapest one on the market, so that when you're trying to get these recordings, you don't want it to be so scratchy you can't hear anything. So this tool not only helps a team member to record time and date for the occurrence wherever you may be, but they are more famously used to record EVPs, or electronic voice phenomenon. If you've seen a lot of TV shows, they use that EVP a lot. If you happen to be using an old school tape recorder, you cannot reuse your tapes, though. Sometimes people like to use the old school media. You cannot reuse the tapes because you run the risk of bleed through of the recordings. And if something is heard on the replay, there is no way to completely rule out that it wasn't there on the previous recording, something that bled through. Now, EVPs are sounds that are not heard at the time of the recording, but are heard on replay, not to be confused with a DVP, or direct voice phenomenon, which is often when you hear the voice kind of directly there in person. You hear that little whisper in your ear or something, but you can hear what's being said. Now, the example of the two gentlemen speaking in the cemetery to us, that's an EVP. We did not hear it when we were there, but we heard it later. The example of a transatlantic voice being picked up on a device, that's like a DVP, a direct voice phenomenon. You're hearing it right there. Cameras. Now, cameras, there's a lot of different kinds. Video and still photography can still be very helpful, but I feel you kind of have to have you can't really have like an old camera, because it gets really fuzzy, and it makes it so that you might just be looking at pixelization. Even more helpful, though, if you can add night vision, thermal, or full spectrum to your setup. For obvious reasons, these are important. You want to see if there's anything there. The evidence that captures a physical entity is undeniable. When you get that first thermal image of somebody walking when there's nobody there, nobody can discredit that. And I think that thermal is by far the most crazy, in my opinion, because you can have a whole area secure. And if a whole person walks across the thermal camera, in a clear, like revolutionary military getup, you can see the outline, it's not one of you. And especially if it's way too cold to be, a live human, but still registering dark enough to clearly make it out. Since we all have phones nowadays, though, a great app that I talk about a lot is the Spirit Talker app. I will say, no, I am not sponsored by them. I just use it a lot. And I think it's a good, you always tend to have it in your pocket kind of thing. As many of my constituents know, we all use it now just because it's an easy thing to have. But I really think it should be used in conjunction with other pieces of equipment. It is made by these dudes overseas. Their company is called Spotted Ghost. They have a few other apps. I don't think they're as good as this one. I like to put my phone into airplane mode and make sure that it does not have Wi-Fi, so that it's not pulling any signal from anywhere. And then it can more pinpoint use the catalog of words, and the entity can choose from its category, from that catalog. Names, numbers. It even has expletives, which I was a little surprised. It doesn't have a lot of them. I think I've only seen one or two, but it has a really big catalog. It records the session's words as well, gives you a timestamp so that you can go back and analyze it. There are so many more, but like I said, these are the ones I see kind of most frequently used. And then, speaking of things in your investigator kit, we've talked about everything here. The golden rules of paranormal investigating. There are many things to remember. You just trust your gut. And if it seems like a place you shouldn't be, then you probably shouldn't be there. So let's go over a little kind of 1, 2, and 3, shall we, of these golden rules. First one, never go alone. Unless you want to be a ghost of a person, who was murdered and or other things, do not go alone. Plus, if you do have something that happens, you have nobody there to back up your story. So this way, you have two people that can say that they were there. Now, if you're freestyling, you're a well-experienced investigator, freestyling, make sure multiple people know where you're going to be and when. Very, very important. Number 2, always ask permission. These all seem like no-brainers, but you would be surprised at how many people get hurt or other because of it. So always ask permission before entering your property or buildings that aren't yours. Do you want to get arrested? Do you want to get shot? Those are things to think of. Even public places have rules about where and when you can be. If a building is abandoned, it doesn't mean that you can go in without permission. And in some states, they can pull, a shotgun on you for being on their property. So get permission in writing. That is really the top piece of information. If you're going to be on a piece of property, get it in writing that you have permission to be there. Cemeteries are places where not only do you want to make sure it's open to the public, but that there isn't a service going on. Very important. So now, having said that, is a segue into the last point, number 3. Be respectful. Leave the location the way that you found it. If you want to be invited back to an awesome location and continue to give credibility to the science of paranormal investigating, then you don't want to be that team that ruins it, or that individual that ruins it for everyone out there that is trying to do kind of the good work, if you will. Places like Trans-Allegheny Asylum or Waverly Asylum, they don't have to let teens in there, but they continue to do so because people follow the rules. Very important. The places that stay open so that the teams can come in are the reason the word keeps getting out about paranormal activity, about these places, especially because there's a lot of hot activity at these places, and keeps us fascinated because of the awesome evidence these groups capture at these investigations. Then that evidence, old and new, is what inspires the books, the movies about the paranormal that we love. Now, in closing, I always like to say, why are we fascinated with the paranormal? Now, the virtual version is a little tricky because I can't ask people to raise their hand, but I'll go first and then I'll take a comment. So you can get ready for that. Now, why am I fascinated with the paranormal? I think this was an obvious by slide 1, but Ghostbusters, the 1984, was what got me hooked. Not the Marshmallow Man or even Gozer the God, While they are fantastic and they were fantastical, the commercial in the early part of the film, which I showed, sticks with me today. I also remember as a kid having Ghostbuster toys and things like that. For me, it was Ray Stantz. Everyone kind of had their own Ghostbuster. And side note, in every paranormal team, you can almost guess who is what character if you had to pick. Who's Venkman, who's Stantz, who's, that kind of thing. So, but Ray had a clear passion for the knowledge of the paranormal and his research.
This is hot, Ray.
Symmetrical book stacking, just like the Philadelphia Man's Turbulence of 1947.
You're right. No human being would stack books like this.
Listen. You smell something?
Also his humor. Now, as I'm an adult, I love his humor. Now, there's multiple parts to this. The next one is the evidence, right? The ectoplasm.
Talk about telekinetic activity. Look at this mess.
Raymond, look at this.
Ectoplasmic residue.
I pray that I find evidence as stark as this someday. And then, now there was a ghost in the movie that did stick with me, and that is the one in the very beginning. At first, you think she's residual, maybe she's just reading a book, and then, boom.
Hello. I'm Peter. Where are you from? Originally.
The fact that she acknowledges them and shushes them is fantastic. There we go. So all those things, you mean tell me there's a scientific way to find a ghost, to detect, to document, and to contain. So now I do ask the virtual audience, what fascinates you about the paranormal? I think everybody has maybe, or maybe, what was your trigger? What got you started? I'll give just a couple minutes here to look and see if anything pops in there. And 'cause it's one of those, we all have a reason why we're interested. Sometimes it's just curiosity, but I think that's in our human nature. Or I think sometimes it's that science part of us. You have to prove to me that it is or is not. And that is oftentimes why I do a more scientific approach. Let's see if I get any. Ray was we have a person in the audience, whoever's who might be listening. Ray was also my favorite. Get that ectoplasm sample. Yes, I agree. Okay. All right. Think I'm going to go ahead. All right. So I want to thank you for joining me today for the Paranormal 101 Creepy Confidential virtual lecture. And oh, we got one. So for me, it's just the mystery. I've always asked a million questions about everything in the world. I can appreciate that. So of course, I'm going to constantly go back to the things that can't be concretely explained. Oh man, that needs to be on a calling card. I love that. Very, very true. I think it's the questions too. The well, why is this? Well, where is this? Where did it come from? How come? I agree. Absolutely. That's a good one. Um, but as we're finishing up here, again, want to thank everybody for coming to the Paranormal 101 virtual lecture. If you are in person at one of our lectures, if you're here, you can check out our Stone Tape Theory touch table with items for the Stone Tape Theory experiment. Just trying to continue that. We are experimenting with the theory and have included some items and investigative equipment with that little traveling case. So next time, if you see us somewhere, it's just something to think about. Like you said, questions. Could those emotions still be with those things? Very, very important. And I think I have covered everything. If you want to check out any of the additional information, you can go to creepyconfidential.com for future classes. I hope to have Paranormal 101 to continue and Paranormal 102 and 103, diving even farther into things like the paranormal fathers that I like to mention, where the word 14 came from. That's part of the paranormal papa. And then talking about kind of the queens of the seance of that spiritualism era. So I thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. And if you have any questions, you can always send us a message either on Instagram or on an email. And I will be reaching out for people who purchase the mystery merch packs so that I can get your address so we can get those to you. So until our next lecture, I want to thank you again for joining me. And thank you for choosing Creepy Confidential to come to a class this morning. Take care.